Today, we are going to look at Karens that died in very stupid ways. From a self-proclaimed expert Karen who ignored basic safety rules while rock climbing, to a Karen who thought warning signs were just suggestions. These are stories that prove confidence without common sense can be deadly. It was March 2nd, 2013, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In the aisles of Hensley's Hardware, a familiar customer walked in with the same restless energy that had led to repeated complaints and warnings. Shelby Mark, 30, worked part-time as a data entry clerk for a local logistics company. She lived alone, kept rigid routines, and had a long-standing fixation on order and rule enforcement. She had begun carrying homemade security tags and plastic zip ties in her purse. She had once looked into volunteer neighborhood patrol groups, but none accepted her because of her overly confrontational approach. She treated stores like controlled environments where she believed she could help by spotting suspicious behavior. Hardware stores especially brought out that impulse. Shelby understood nothing about theft prevention systems beyond what she read online, but she trusted her instincts more than the staff's experience. Hensley's employees had asked her not to intervene in customer activity, yet she returned often, convinced she could prevent imagined crimes. The store's layout, tall shelves, heavy boxed equipment stacked high, narrow aisles, added hazards she never acknowledged. That morning, a man in his late 30s walked in and began collecting small hand tools, measuring tape, and a set of replacement blades. Security footage showed Shelby shadowing him through 2 aisles. An employee told her to let them handle any concerns, but she ignored it. When the man headed toward the exit with his paid receipt, she followed closely. A light snow warning had just come across local radio, urging residents to head home early. Staff were preoccupied with preparing for the rush that usually followed weather alerts, leaving her actions unnoticed for a moment too long. As the man approached the doors, Shelby stepped in front of him and grabbed his arm. She announced her intent to detain him, pulling a zip tie from her purse and trying to loop it around his wrist. He recoiled immediately. Later information from his family confirmed his severe claustrophobia, which caused instant panic in tight situations. He pulled away harder, his posture rigid and frantic. Employees started shouting for her to stop, but she tightened her grip, convinced she just needed to restrain him long enough for staff to intervene. Security footage shows her shoving him when he twisted free, trying to regain control. That shove sent him stepping backward in fear, and his shoulders struck her chest with enough force to knock her off balance. She staggered directly into a shelving unit, loaded with boxed equipment. An 80-pound air compressor, positioned on the top shelf for months, became destabilized by the sudden vibration. In the frame-by-frame playback, it tips slowly at first, then gains momentum. The corner of the box dropped and struck the left side of Shelby's skull with a sharp compression force. She collapsed immediately, her body folding backward onto the concrete. A pool of blood spread from beneath her head within seconds. The man froze on the floor in a panic response, unable to approach. Employees lifted the box off her and called emergency services. Responders checked for pulse and respiration, but noted the absence of both. The shelving unit, though damaged by the impact, hadn't fully collapsed, corroborating that the fatal blow came directly from the falling air compressor rather than secondary debris. Paramedics transported her, but she never regained consciousness. The medical examiner's report documented a catastrophic skull fracture on the left temporal region, a large subdural hematoma, and immediate loss of brain function. For an impact of this type, the force generated by an 80-pound object falling roughly 6 to 8 feet aligns with these injuries, supporting plausibility. Store cameras provided a clear sequence of events, confirming she initiated the confrontation and that the man's contact was a panic reaction rather than intentional harm. Police classified the death as accidental and no charges were filed. The hardware store installed additional restraints on high shelving and issued a public reminder instructing customers not to intervene in suspected theft situations. It was December 5th, 2018, deep in the quiet outskirts of Monroe County, Michigan, where the winter air pressed cold and heavy against the trees. At the end of a long, rutted gravel road sat 2 properties divided by a sagging fence. One belonging to a retired veteran seeking isolation, the other to a woman who had never learned to leave people alone. Deborah Miller, 51, had moved to the countryside 2 years earlier after selling her condo in the city. She told people she wanted peace and space, but in practice, she brought conflict wherever she went. In Monroe County, she clashed immediately with her nearest neighbor, a reclusive Vietnam veteran named Walter Briggs. She accused him of running machinery too late at night and once reported him to the county over an imagined zoning violation. Locals joked that Deborah treated rural living like a homeowners association board meeting. Her new lifestyle came with none of the structure she'd had in the city. She spent mornings posting pictures of her poodle, Daisy, and arguing with strangers on community pages about leash laws. The gravel road between her yard and Briggs's was poorly fenced, and the veteran had warned her multiple times to keep the dog contained. Still, Deborah dismissed him as paranoid. That December morning, when Daisy slipped under the fence and disappeared, Deborah likely didn't think. She reacted. She decided that her neighbor had done something to her dog. The temperature was just above freezing when she stomped down the gravel drive, shouting the dog's name. Briggs's property was marked by clear "no trespassing" signs, but Deborah ignored them, marching past an old pickup and onto the front porch. She began pounding on the door, her voice sharp and rising. Her words echoed across the trees, pulling Briggs from a medicated sleep inside. He had been prescribed sedatives to manage his night terrors, the kind that left him disoriented when startled. The security camera mounted above the porch later filled in the missing seconds. The door opens abruptly. Briggs, still in a faded t-shirt, holding a 12-gauge pump shotgun angled toward the ground. Deborah steps closer instead of retreating, pointing at him and shouting. She gestures wildly, stepping into his personal space. When Briggs raises the weapon slightly in warning, Deborah lunges forward, both hands out, either to shove it aside or grab it. The camera shows a scuffle, a blur of motion, a hand on the barrel, then a single blast. Deborah collapses instantly, the recoil throwing Briggs backward into the doorway. Briggs kneels beside her, shaking, trying to compress the wound as blood darkens the wood beneath them. Neighbors reported hearing his panicked calls for help. Deputies arrived within 15 minutes to find Briggs unarmed, sitting motionless beside her body. She had been struck in the upper chest. The wound was unsurvivable. The poodle was later found unharmed, wandering the tree line behind both properties. Investigators confirmed Briggs's weapon was legally owned and that Deborah had crossed onto his porch without consent. Witness statements and prior police reports documented her repeated harassment of Briggs over minor grievances. The sheriff's department ruled the incident self-defense, citing the circumstances and Deborah's aggressive behavior. In the weeks that followed, local residents placed new "no trespassing" signs at the end of their drives. The case was quietly closed, but news circulated as an example of how arrogance can turn fatal when mixed with fear and isolation. It was September 15, 2016, at Wat Phra Sing in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The air was heavy with humidity, and rain from the morning monsoon clung to every polished surface. The temple's bells chimed softly in the distance as visitors moved quietly, sandals stacked neatly by the entrance. Amid the calm reverence, one foreign tourist was growing restless. Chloe Davenport, 39, tried to make her living on contrarian travel content. Her channel was built on disdain. She positioned herself as a truth teller, claiming to expose fake tourism experiences. In reality, her videos drew small audiences who watched more for the spectacle than the insight. Brands had stopped sponsoring her months before, citing unprofessional tone. Yet Chloe remained convinced she was on the verge of a breakout moment. She micromanaged her boyfriend, who doubled as cameraman, and berated locals when they didn't cooperate with them. Her reputation for confrontations had followed her through hostels across Southeast Asia. Temples like Wat Phra Sing, especially during the monsoon season, required care and awareness. The marble terraces became slick from condensation and tracked in rainwater. Signs warned visitors in multiple languages to remove shoes for safety and respect. Monks cleaned the floors frequently, keeping them pristine but dangerously polished when damp. Tour guides routinely reminded tourists to walk slowly, especially near the upper terrace steps. To most visitors, The rules were simple. Tradition and caution intertwined. But to Chloe, they were just another obstacle to her content. That afternoon, she arrived under gray skies, complaining about the dreary light and the smell of incense. The temple's courtyard glistened under scattered droplets, and her boyfriend reminded her about the posted warnings. Chloe dismissed him, filming herself mocking the signs before a robed monk approached. Witnesses later recalled her loud, cutting tone as she argued that removing shoes was unsanitary. The monk remained calm, pointing again toward the rack by the gate. Finally, Chloe yanked off her sandals in exaggerated frustration. She stepped onto the terrace, phone angled upward, her bare soles slapping quickly against the wet marble as she moved without caution. Other tourists treaded carefully, some stopping to watch her perform. She moved fast, impatient, pacing backward for a wider shot and grumbling about stupid rules. Her boyfriend raised his arm in warning as she shifted weight onto her left foot. The instant it slipped, her balance broke completely. Her legs shot forward and her upper body snapped backward, striking the floor with audible force. The impact fractured the back of her skull and caused an immediate loss of consciousness. Momentum carried her toward the nearby staircase, where her head struck the first stone step before her body tumbled down several more. By the time she stopped at the bottom, her phone had skidded several feet away. Tourists rushed over. A monk knelt beside her, checking for breathing and pulse but not attempting to move her, while others shouted for help in Thai. Temple staff activated the local emergency line, and an ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics began CPR, but quickly determined that her injuries were incompatible with survival. A basilar skull fracture with cervical trauma, consistent with a high-energy fall onto stone. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Thai authorities reviewed the footage and ruled the death accidental, citing unsafe conduct in a restricted area. The temple closed the terrace for 2 days to perform a cleansing ceremony and placed additional safety mats and signage afterward. Chloe's family released no public statement. Her online accounts were taken down upon their request. Among the travel community in Chiang Mai, her name became shorthand for what happens when arrogance meets gravity. It was August 15, 2019, at Angel's Landing Trail in Zion National Park, Utah. Perfect blue skies and blazing heat brought thousands of hikers to one of America's most dangerous trails. The narrow ridge approach had already seen at least one fatal fall earlier that year, according to park safety summaries, but the stunning views continued drawing visitors willing to risk everything for the perfect photo. Skylar Voss, 24, was a Phoenix resident who worked part-time at a juice bar and often described herself as an unrecognized creator. Friends said she frequently complained that people didn't take her content seriously, despite her small online following of 847 Instagram followers. She drove to Utah alone, posting throughout the trip about being held back by people who don't understand creativity. She carried standard hiking gear, but prioritized her iPhone, portable battery pack, and a small portable LED light for filming. Park entrance records show Voss arrived at 6:47 a.m. and received standard safety briefing materials. Ranger logs indicate she expressed frustration about the safety chains, saying they ruined her planned photoshoot aesthetic. She complained that the chains were ruining her photos and asked if there was any way to shoot without them. Rangers told her the safety barriers could not be altered under any circumstances. Multiple witnesses reported Voss stopping frequently to film content, often blocking narrow trail sections while setting up shots. She posted Instagram stories throughout the ascent mocking safety warnings as fear-mongering designed to prevent authentic content creation. A Denver family documented her berating other hikers for walking through her filming areas, demanding they wait until she completed her takes. Voss reached the summit around 1:30 p.m., where approximately 25 other hikers were present. According to witness statements, she immediately complained loudly about other visitors ruining her shots and demanded people move away from scenic viewpoints. She took out a small portable LED light and began filming near the chains, speaking into her live stream about how influencers needed to capture shots without barriers in the frame. Witnesses estimated she spent roughly 40 minutes attempting progressively riskier poses near the edge. Several hikers said they heard her describe one sequence as a falling-style selfie, during which she leaned backward over the drop while holding her phone out in front of her. Witnesses also reported she became increasingly frustrated when others would not move aside to give her the space she wanted for her filming. According to the Denver family, they heard her tell her live stream audience that she was about to film something she believed would finally make her go viral. She positioned herself beyond all safety barriers and began her third falling selfie attempt. While leaning backward and holding her phone at arm's length, she lost footing on smooth sandstone and fell approximately 1,000 feet down the cliff face. The incident occurred at 2:43 p.m., according to multiple witness timestamps. Witnesses attempted to call 911 using their personal cell phones, eventually connecting from a spot with enough signal to reach emergency services. Zion's search and rescue teams were dispatched at 2:51 p.m. The technical rescue operation required specialized high-angle rope rescue equipment. Teams rappelled down the cliff face, reaching Voss's location at 4:15 p.m. She was found deceased with massive trauma, consistent with high-altitude fall onto rock surfaces. The medical examiner's report documented massive blunt force trauma as cause of death. Death would have been instantaneous upon impact, with the first rock outcropping. Her final Instagram story remained visible for the next 24 hours, which is standard for the platform. Following the incident, Zion installed additional warning signage specifically addressing social media-related risk-taking behaviors and implemented policies requiring ranger intervention when visitors engage in dangerous photography activities. It was September 12, 2015, at Niagara Falls State Park, New York. Overcast skies and lingering dampness from recent storms made the observation walkways slick from constant mist near Terrapin Point. Mist from the thundering falls created a slippery maze where one wrong step could prove fatal, especially for someone not watching where they were going. Vivian Blackwood, 45, was a Westchester County real estate agent who had driven 6 hours and 47 minutes to locate her 19-year-old twins after they blocked her on all location tracking applications and social media platforms. Blackwood maintained detailed digital surveillance of her children's activities, including GPS tracking, social media monitoring, and regular contact with their college professors. She had brought a 3-ring binder containing printed safety statistics, emergency contact protocols, and documentation of her children's poor decision-making history. Park entrance records show Blackwood arrived at 1:33 p.m. and immediately approached visitor services demanding information about locating specific individuals. Visitor services logs note she spent 47 minutes arguing with supervisors about parental rights and threatening to contact corporate headquarters about uncooperative staff. Multiple witnesses reported Blackwood approaching other visitors, asking if they had seen her children, showing photographs and demanding detailed information. She carried a laminated map with highlighted areas where she believed her children might be located, along with a detailed timeline of their likely movements based on social media activity. Blackwood located her children at Terrapin Point around 2:47 p.m., where approximately 30 visitors were present viewing the falls. According to witness statements, she immediately began shouting across the observation area about their location and demanding explanations for blocked communication. The twins, Emily and Jason, attempted to leave upon seeing their mother, prompting Blackwood to pursue them while making loud statements about disrespect and parental authority. Park incident reports document Blackwood following her children onto increasingly wet and slippery sections of the observation walkway while gesturing emphatically and demanding attention. An Ohio tourist reported Blackwood stepping onto particularly slick patches of pavement while focused entirely on lecturing her children rather than watching footing. Witnesses described her waving her binder of safety statistics while pursuing her fleeing children, shouting about the dangers they were exposing themselves to by avoiding her. According to multiple witness accounts, Blackwood's pursuit became increasingly frantic as her children continued avoiding her. Wet rocks, combined with complete focus on children rather than footing, created conditions that multiple witnesses later described as extremely unsafe. The incident occurred at 3:12 p.m. when Blackwood stepped backward onto pavement sections wet from recent rainfall and coated with thin algae from the fall's constant mist. She slipped backward on the slick pavement, collided with the railing, and toppled over it, falling roughly 40 feet onto the rocks below. Blackwood was found roughly 40 feet below the observation platform, on the rocks beneath the railing. Emergency response teams arrived at 3:21 p.m. She was extracted using rope rescue techniques and transported to Niagara Falls Memorial Medical Center, arriving at 4:07 p.m. Despite immediate medical intervention, including emergency surgery for traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding, Blackwood never regained consciousness. The medical examiner documented severe blunt force trauma to head and torso as cause of death, with injuries consistent with multiple impacts against rock surfaces during uncontrolled fall. It was July 14, 2016, at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Peak summer crowds packed the popular beach despite red flags warning of deadly rip currents. Lifeguards worked overtime, trying to keep swimmers safe from invisible underwater rivers that could drag even strong swimmers to their deaths within minutes. Brielle Sterling, 29, was a Charlotte resident who worked intermittently as a fitness instructor and maintained active social media accounts focused on fitness content and lifestyle advice. Sterling had recently been terminated from her gym position following multiple complaints about inappropriate behavior toward other members, and had driven to Myrtle Beach with college acquaintances for what she described as a demonstration of superior physical conditioning. She carried professional camera equipment for documenting workout content and had posted multiple videos that week about physical superiority and ocean swimming abilities. Myrtle Beach lifeguard service records show Sterling had been warned 3 times that morning about entering water during red flag conditions. Beginning at 9:47 a.m., multiple tourists observed her filming content that dismissed safety warnings and criticized other visitors for remaining in shallow water. Sterling positioned herself near a group of college students around 1:45 p.m., where she began filming content about demonstrating proper swimming technique and real ocean fitness. According to witness statements, she made loud statements about her physical conditioning while gesturing toward rough surf and criticizing other beach visitors as weak and unprepared for real swimming challenges. She entered the water multiple times while continuing to film content about her superior abilities. Beach Patrol incident reports document Sterling creating increasingly elaborate content designed to demonstrate swimming prowess and physical superiority. She swam progressively further offshore while making statements about her conditioning and criticizing safety warnings as applicable only to weak individuals. Lifeguards used whistles, megaphones, and hand signals directing her to return to shore, but she continued swimming further out while gesturing dismissively. According to witness statements collected during the investigation, Sterling had been in the water for approximately 25 minutes, swimming in an area roughly 200 yards offshore where the documented rip current was strongest. A Virginia family observed her encounter obvious difficulty around 2:30 p.m., noting her swimming pattern changed from confident strokes to apparent struggling against the current. The rescue situation developed when Sterling was caught in documented rip current approximately 250 yards from shore, where current speed had been measured at 4.7 miles per hour that morning. Instead of swimming parallel to beach, as recommended in posted safety briefings, she attempted to swim directly against the current while continuing to maintain the camera equipment. Lifeguards launched rescue watercraft immediately upon observing her obvious distress. Rescue teams reached Sterling's approximate location at 2:47 p.m., but she had already submerged after what witnesses described as several minutes of increasingly frantic swimming against current. Underwater recovery efforts using sonar equipment and dive teams located her at 3:31 p.m. in approximately 14 feet of water. Sterling was extracted, and immediate resuscitation efforts were initiated on the beach, including CPR and advanced life support measures. She was then transported to a nearby medical facility, where attempts to revive her continued for an extended period before she was pronounced dead at 4:52 p.m. The medical examiner identified drowning as the primary cause of death, with contributing factors including exhaustion from fighting the rip current and poor decision-making in hazardous conditions. It was April 10, 2020, at a small, private rental home 25 miles outside Denver, Colorado. The property sat on a quiet road near a line of older pine trees with a narrow driveway leading to the two-story event-style house used for small gatherings. The guest that weekend was 39-year-old Marla Jensen. She lived in Aurora and worked in retail, and co-workers later described her as strict about rules when they applied to others, but more flexible with herself. Friends said she often expected people to follow her plans and regularly left cleanup tasks to others during small gatherings. She had rented the property for her birthday and invited more than a dozen people, but only 3 friends showed up. Witnesses said she drank heavily and left food and drinks scattered around the living room before 2 of the guests headed home near midnight. Checkout time was set for 11 a.m. When the cleaning team arrived at 10:45, they reported that Marla refused to let them in at first and insisted she needed more time. Once inside, they found the living room littered with trash and noted multiple slippery spots near the staircase, including dried soda and a newer spill close to the first step. As the cleaners moved around to document the condition of the property, Marla walked up the staircase, insisting she still needed access to the upper floor. The cleaners said she moved quickly and ignored their request to stay downstairs while they assessed the mess. One cleaner noticed her foot slide slightly on the first step, but didn't think she lost her balance at that moment. He later reported that her steps looked uneven and unsteady as she continued upward, and said he smelled alcohol when she passed him on the staircase. Based on witness statements, the fall happened less than a minute later. The cleaners heard a sharp slip sound, followed by 2 rapid impacts on the steps. When they turned, they saw Marla tumbling down the lower section of the staircase, her foot sliding off the edge of a wet patch on the lowest steps where spilled drink had pooled across several treads. She fell backward, and her momentum carried her down the remaining distance until the back of her head struck the concrete landing at the base. One cleaner described the sound as a single, heavy thud. She did not attempt to get up or respond. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics found her unresponsive with no reaction to pain and noted a deep scalp wound at the occipital area. She was pronounced dead shortly after reaching the hospital. The coroner determined that she died from blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Toxicology showed a blood alcohol concentration of 0.12%, which investigators cited as a factor in her instability. They also documented the wet spill on the stair tread. Their report concluded that the fall began when she ignored checkout rules and went upstairs during cleaning. The owner later updated rental policies, requiring guests to report spills on stairs or elevated surfaces. It was August 29, 2020, at a multi-level retail complex in the Bukit Bintang district of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Heat reflected across the rear loading corridors as trucks cycled through scheduled movements, forming conditions where stepping beyond customer access areas placed individuals in active vehicle zones with limited visibility. Yvette Yu, 37, had visited the mall that afternoon to return an item she claimed to have purchased the day before. She approached the store intending to receive a refund before meeting her family later. Friends described her as assertive and easily frustrated when policy limits conflicted with her expectations. Family accounts indicated she frequently reacted strongly to situations she considered unfair, especially when guidelines limited what she wanted to do. Inside the store, witnesses recalled her growing agitated when staff explained that a refund could not be processed without proof of purchase. Several employees reported that she advanced toward the counter while raising her voice. Security footage showed mall personnel stepping in as her behavior escalated, guiding her toward the exit to prevent disruption. The service lane behind the complex operated on a timed rotation, with large trailers maneuvering through narrow passages that created blind spots. Surveillance footage showed Yvette moving abruptly away from the main walkway after being escorted out. Instead of continuing toward the public parking area, she walked directly past warning signs marking the service entrance as restricted to authorized personnel only. Witnesses stated she deliberately ignored the directional signage, pushing through the clearly marked pedestrian barrier to enter the delivery corridor. A pair of trailers had just received clearance to reposition when Yvette entered the corridor. Surveillance footage showed her crossing the lane at a diagonal, moving between a stationary loading bay and a trailer preparing to pull forward. The driver's cabin sat elevated, leaving a blind area along the leading edge where pedestrians could not be seen. Witnesses positioned near the loading bay observed her pause approximately 15 feet from the moving trailer's path. She then continued forward at an angle that brought her directly into the trailer's turning radius. The front corner of the advancing trailer entered the corridor at approximately 5 miles per hour. The trailer's leading edge made contact with Yvette's right side as she stepped into its path. The impact occurred at torso height, with enough force to knock her sideways. Witnesses described seeing her body twist from the initial contact before falling toward the pavement. The driver did not detect the collision until bystanders began shouting. Yvette struck the ground hard, landing on her left side with her head making contact with the concrete surface. The trailer continued moving forward approximately 2 additional feet before the driver applied the brakes. Staff from the loading area rushed toward her position. Responders arrived shortly afterward and assessed her condition. She showed no signs of movement when they reached her. The coroner determined that she died from blunt force injuries, consistent with being struck by a moving trailer. Mall management later installed additional physical barriers separating customer walkways from delivery lanes. It was January 15th, 2024, in a gated residential community approximately 15 miles outside Phoenix, Arizona. Afternoon heat shimmered across the asphalt driveways as homeowners returned from weekend errands. The neighborhood featured strict homeowners association rules regarding property modifications, creating an environment where disputes over violations often escalated beyond initial complaints. Patricia Vance, 42, had lived in the community for 3 years and served on the Homeowners Association board. Neighbors described her as obsessive about enforcing community standards, frequently photographing minor violations and filing formal complaints against residents she felt were not maintaining their properties appropriately. Fellow board members noted she often took enforcement actions personally when homeowners challenged her authority and regularly escalated disputes rather than seeking compromise. The conflict that day involved a neighbor who had installed decorative solar panels without prior board approval. Patricia had filed multiple complaints over the previous month, demanding immediate removal of the panels. When the neighbor refused and cited state laws protecting solar installations, Patricia became increasingly agitated and began researching ways to force compliance. That afternoon, Patricia decided to document what she considered ongoing violations by entering the neighbor's backyard while the family was away. Security camera footage showed her walking through an unlocked side gate and moving toward the rear of the house where the solar panels were mounted. She carried her phone and appeared to be taking photographs from multiple angles. The backyard featured a decorative koi pond approximately 7 feet deep at its center, with steep concrete sides that sloped from 3 feet at the edges to the full depth in the middle section. The pond's edge sat flush with the surrounding lawn, making the transition difficult to detect. Patricia moved backward while photographing the solar panels, her attention focused entirely on framing the shots. Security footage showed her taking several steps away from the house to capture a wider angle of the roof installation. The pond lay directly behind her position, though the grass-level border provided no visual warning. As she continued stepping backward, her right foot landed on the narrow concrete edge of the pond. The smooth surface, still wet from the automatic watering system, provided no traction. Her foot slipped immediately, causing her to lose balance and fall backward into the pond. Security footage captured the fall sequence. Patricia dropped into the water in a backward tumbling motion. The back of her head struck the concrete edge with significant force during the initial fall. She entered the water face down, her body going limp immediately after the head strike. The impact rendered her unconscious instantly. Footage showed no coordinated movement after she entered the water. She remained face down in the deeper center section of the pond. The neighbor's security system sent a motion alert to the homeowner's phone, but the notification was missed during their shopping trip. The family returned home approximately 40 minutes later and discovered Patricia's body floating in the pond. They immediately called emergency services. Responders arrived within 10 minutes, but determined she had been deceased for some time. The coroner determined she died from drowning after losing consciousness from blunt force trauma to the head. Forensic analysis indicated the impact rendered her unable to respond to the water submersion, and death occurred within approximately 3 to 5 minutes of the fall. Police conducted a thorough investigation, reviewing all security footage. The footage clearly showed Patricia entering the property without permission and the accidental nature of her fall. No charges were filed against the homeowner after investigators determined Patricia had entered the property unlawfully and the pond met all local safety codes. The Homeowners Association later revised policies regarding board member conduct during violation investigations, requiring all property inspections to be conducted with homeowner consent and prohibiting unauthorized entry onto private property. It was December 23, 2018, in a suburban shopping center outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Snowbanks lined the parking lot, and inside a big box grocery store, holiday crowds moved shoulder to shoulder beneath bright, fluorescent lights. Seasonal music played overhead as employees hurried to restock empty shelves. A temporary display near the meat department announced the last delivery of Christmas hams. Linda Carver was 48, unemployed, and living on credit while waiting for what she called the right opportunity. She prided herself on never settling, especially during holidays she believed rewarded those who acted decisively. Scarcity irritated her. Waiting felt like weakness. She believed taking more than needed was simply preparation. The ham freezer was already surrounded when she arrived. Only a few remained. A senior couple reached the case first and carefully selected one ham, then another, following posted limits. Linda pushed her cart forward and reached past them, pulling remaining hams from the shelf and stacking them into her cart in quick succession. Employees moved toward the area as raised voices drew attention. The seniors stepped back. Linda continued loading. The hams were large and frozen solid. Condensation and melt water from repeated freezer openings had spread across the tile floor. Yellow caution cones had been placed nearby during restocking, but shoppers stepped around them to reach the display. Linda ignored them entirely. Her cart was now overloaded, with heavy hams stacked high and uneven. She grabbed one more from a restock crate and turned sharply, trying to maneuver away before anyone intervened. The front wheels rolled onto the damp tile and skidded sideways. The cart tipped. The sudden shift pulled her forward. She lost her footing and fell headfirst toward the end of the freezer aisle. Her temples struck the sharp metal corner of a low freezer unit. The sound of impact cut through the noise of the store. Her body collapsed beside the overturned cart as the frozen hams slid across the floor. Shoppers screamed and backed away. An employee called for help and emergency services while others tried to block the area. Linda did not move. Blood pooled quickly beneath her head. She showed no signs of regaining consciousness. Paramedics arrived within minutes and assessed her on the floor. She had no purposeful response and shallow, irregular breathing that stopped during evaluation. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. She was pronounced dead at the scene as police secured the aisle and reviewed store footage. The medical examiner later reported a severe blunt force head injury. The impact caused a skull fracture and catastrophic brain trauma. Death occurred rapidly following the fall. Toxicology was negative. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Investigators noted no equipment malfunction. The floor was wet from normal freezer condensation. Warning cones were present. The cart had exceeded safe load balance. The incident resulted from rushing, overloading, and ignoring visible safety precautions. The store removed the remaining hams from the floor and closed the aisle for cleanup. The senior couple left quietly before police finished documenting the scene. Shopping resumed elsewhere in the store within the hour. Investigators noted that the item limits had been clearly posted, warning cones were visible, and staff had been moving in to intervene before the fall. None of those measures failed. Linda's cart, overloaded with more holiday hams than one household could use, was rolled away by employees, and the items were removed from the floor and discarded under store loss procedures. It was August 14, 2015, in County Cork, Ireland. Light winds moved through the pastures beside the tourist riding stable. The morning looked routine, but a single guest's insistence on proving something she could not do set the stage for a fatal accident. Mara Deegan, 33, worked as a retail visual merchandiser for a home goods chain in Dublin. Years earlier, she had taken a short beginner riding course, but she often exaggerated those lessons as if they were advanced training. Friends said that riding appealed less as a genuine interest and more as a way for her to present herself as adventurous. The stable catered to tourists with limited experience. Horses were assigned by temperaments suited to varying rider skills, and equipment was fitted by staff before departure. English saddles, light and narrow, required riders to maintain proper balance, and stirrup adjustment was critical for emergency dismounts. Mara showed little patience for these steps. Staff later noted she rushed through instructions, pulling at straps herself and brushing off offers to recheck her gear. Investigators later confirmed that her stirrup leathers were set several inches too long, increasing the risk of entrapment during a fall. That morning's trail was standard, but a gusty weather advisory had been posted, noting occasional sudden wind bursts across higher ground. When told she needed the introductory horse for the warm-up loop, Mara argued loudly, insisting she could handle Bracken, a tall, energetic gelding used only for confident, balanced riders. Bystanders reported the handler repeating that Bracken reacted strongly to abrupt rein pressure. Mara ignored this, stepped onto the mounting block, and climbed on without waiting for the handler to steady the horse. During the warm-up pass, she continued pulling sharply on the reins in an attempt to force Bracken into a quicker pace. Her saddle posture leaned forward, shifting her weight over his neck instead of centered over the seat. The wind picked up again, lifting grass clippings and rustling feed bags against a nearby shed. The guides called for everyone to maintain spacing, but Mara urged Bracken ahead, closing the distance. Helmet camera footage from a rider behind her showed the moment a loose plastic feed bag blew across the path. Bracken shied hard to the left, his body tensing with a sharp sidestep. Mara, leaning forward and holding the reins too tightly, was pitched off the right side. She hit the ground, shoulder first, the impact kicking up dust. Her boot became trapped in the stirrup, a recognized hazard in falls that increases drag and torque on the leg. Staff later confirmed she had dismissed the fitting correction that would have prevented the entrapment. Bracken bolted, dragging her across compacted dirt and scattered gravel. Witnesses saw her body striking the ground repeatedly as the horse accelerated, pulling her nearly 70 yards across the lane. She collided with a wooden fence post, her torso folding sharply on impact. The post shook from the force, and she rolled once before the horse slowed. Given Mara's trajectory and the distance traveled, medical examiners later noted the combination of cranial rotation and limb torsion was consistent with a fall and drag pattern at this speed. Bracken continued forward another several steps before crashing into a low metal gate, injuring his foreleg in the process. When Bracken finally stopped near a corral gate, staff rushed in and called for help. Emergency responders arrived shortly after. Despite attempts at resuscitation, paramedics declared Mara dead at the scene due to catastrophic trauma. The coroner's report documented massive cranial injuries, atlanto-occipital dislocation at the upper spine, and extensive deglobing injuries from being dragged. A veterinarian later confirmed Bracken had sustained a severe compound fracture to the right foreleg during the collision, and the injury was grave enough that he was humanely euthanized later that afternoon. The stable implemented mandatory pre-ride checks and experience verification the following month. It was March 22, 2014, in Vancouver, British Columbia. The day looked ordinary, but inside one small apartment, a chain of petty decisions and simmering resentments was already aligning toward a self-inflicted disaster. Dina Callan, 35, worked from home as a freelance catalog editor for small online retailers. Her clients described her as efficient but combative, someone who pushed hard for discounts and felt wronged easily. Over years of living alone and dealing with recurring money problems, she developed a pattern of gaming delivery apps for free meals. She filed complaints so frequently that several restaurants flagged her account, noting she berated drivers and claimed symptoms like nausea or headaches within hours of receiving an order. Her apartment was equipped with an indoor camera system meant for checking on her dog, but she often let it record continuously. The clean feed and timestamps later helped establish a precise sequence of the events that unfolded. The incident began after she filed another complaint against a small family-owned Thai restaurant she had already targeted multiple times. That week, the business had struggled with slow foot traffic and a recent illness among kitchen staff. The owner's nephew, who often helped with deliveries, had grown frustrated with fraudulent refund claims and insisted on bringing the replacement order himself. Rain was still falling when he left the restaurant, and several nearby shops recorded him passing in a hurry. When Dinah opened her apartment door, security footage from a storefront across the street showed her gesturing impatiently. Indoor camera timestamps revealed that she set the container on her dining table within seconds of receiving it. She ate many of her meals immediately after arrival, and this was no different. She appeared unaware of the faint alkaline scent, which was partially masked by the strong spices in the dish. Investigators later determined the meal had been contaminated with a high-strength alkaline fryer cleaner containing concentrated sodium hydroxide, a caustic chemical stored in the restaurant's back room. Caustic residue found on the delivery container matched the heavy-duty cleaning gloves the nephew had worn while handling the fryer cleaner earlier that day. The recording from Dana's indoor camera showed her taking several quick bites before her expression shifted. She stopped chewing almost immediately, grimaced in pain, and pressed her hand to her throat. Within seconds, she gagged violently as the caustic chemical began burning her mouth and upper airway. Seconds later, she vomited forcefully as swelling in her airway progressed rapidly. She staggered, collapsed onto her side, and her breathing became erratic as her upper airway began to close. The footage recorded her entering brief anoxic spasms before she rolled onto her back and stopped breathing. The coroner documented extensive corrosive burns to the mouth and upper airway, severe laryngeal edema, and mucosal sloughing consistent with concentrated alkaline ingestion. Toxicology confirmed high concentrations of sodium hydroxide consistent with caustic ingestion. Death was attributed to acute respiratory failure caused by rapid upper airway swelling and caustic injury compounded by shock. Police traced the contamination to the restaurant's supply closet after matching residue from the meal to the bottles stored there. The delivery worker was arrested. Dina's family settled a civil claim quietly, and the restaurant closed within months under financial strain. It was June 17, 2014, in Riverside, California. A clear afternoon sun hung over a mid-range apartment complex near the College District, where move-in trucks lined the curb and students passed through the courtyard with boxes and backpacks. The setting was routine, controlled, and safe, until a simple task was turned into a fatal shortcut. Heather Collins was 36, recently divorced, and living on child support and savings while raising 2 elementary-aged children. She ran a local Facebook group dedicated to publicly confronting and filming service workers she believed were incompetent. The group rewarded escalation, filmed arguments, raised voices, and visible dominance were treated as proof of authority. Neighbors described her as someone who refused to take small steps if a louder one felt faster. That afternoon, movers arrived to unload furniture from a shared truck. One couch became a problem. Heather wanted it angled differently through the doorway and believed the crew was ignoring her instructions. Instead of walking downstairs, a delay of less than a minute, she chose to control the situation from above. Standing on her 4th-floor balcony, she leaned over the railing, phone raised, shouting corrections downward while her children recorded from inside. Distance frustrated her. The workers below continued adjusting the couch, unable to hear her clearly. Heather responded by leaning farther out, exaggerating arm movements to demonstrate angles. The balcony railing was aluminum, bolted into concrete as a visual barrier, not a support. Warning placards were posted on the interior side, but she never turned around to see them. Rather than go downstairs, Heather stepped onto the lower horizontal bar of the railing to extend her reach. Witnesses later said it appeared deliberate, an attempt to loom closer while still filming. The bar bent instantly. The anchor points tore free with a sharp metallic snap. With her weight shifted outward, she had no chance to recover balance. She pitched forward, clearing the balcony entirely. Her phone slipped from her hand as her body rotated headfirst. She fell 4 stories onto the concrete walkway below. Her head struck first, followed by her shoulder and torso. The sound of impact echoed through the courtyard. Blood spread across the pavement. The movers froze. Tenants screamed. The children continued recording, not yet processing what had happened. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived within minutes and found no signs of consciousness or breathing. The injuries were visibly catastrophic. No resuscitation was attempted. The coroner reported extensive skull fractures, massive brain trauma, and catastrophic upper cervical spine injury consistent with a headfirst fall from height. Death was instantaneous. Toxicology was negative, The ruling was accidental. Investigators noted there was no equipment failure. The railing functioned as designed. The fall resulted entirely from misuse. The apartment complex replaced the damaged railing the same day and upgraded balcony barriers within 3 months as a precaution. Heather's Facebook group was deleted that evening. Her children were taken from the apartment by relatives before nightfall. The footage was collected by investigators and never released. The couch was delivered without further incident. It was January 28, 2018, at the Alpine Lodge and Spa in Aspen, Colorado. Inside the glass walls of the pool complex, only the hum of filtration pumps and the faint rippling of water broke the stillness. A 55-year-old guest, known among the staff for her relentless complaints, had finally found a moment where no one could tell her no. Monica Braithwaite came from money, but not warmth. Divorced twice, she split her time between real estate investments and luxury retreats, convinced her spending granted her special privilege. At every property she visited, she left a trail of incident reports, arguments with front desk staff, threats of online reviews, confrontations over non-existent service lapses. She demanded bottled water brands few hotels carried and often inspected sheets for microscopic imperfections. Her life revolved around control, and Aspen was supposed to be her winter refuge. The Alpine Lodge was designed for comfort at altitude. Sealed glass enclosures, automated heating, and natural gas systems calibrated for efficiency. The indoor-outdoor pool maintained a stable 82 degrees Fahrenheit through a thermostat-controlled heater in an adjacent service room. It was safe, modern, and unremarkable, unless someone tampered with it. Staff were trained never to exceed set parameters, since gas-based systems in thin mountain air could vent improperly. That restriction made sense to everyone except Monica, who saw it as defiance. That afternoon, she stormed out of the spa when told the pool was at temperature. Several witnesses overheard her muttering about lazy employees and cheap operations. The young attendant she confronted tried to remain polite, repeating that adjustments required management approval. When the general manager reinforced that policy, Monica left in icy silence, face taut with restrained fury. Security cameras later showed her returning just before midnight, wrapped in a white robe, slippers scraping against the tile. The service door was slightly ajar. Maintenance had left it unsecured after calibrating the filtration pump earlier that evening. Monica slipped through. Inside, the equipment room was humid and warm, lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube. She located the heater, an older but functional natural gas unit, and spotted the manual control valve. She twisted it with both hands, grunting as the metal resisted. When it finally gave way, she likely heard the faint roar of ignition. What she couldn't see was the small crack in the flue gasket, a fracture that allowed exhaust gases to leak directly into the closed air system. In the thin, low-oxygen air of Aspen, incomplete combustion worsened the buildup, creating a dense pocket of carbon monoxide near floor level. Over the next 15 minutes, carbon monoxide displaced breathable air. Monica reclined on a lounge chair beside the pool, satisfied with herself. Within minutes, the first symptoms, lightheadedness, confusion, would have begun. Witness reconstruction suggests she stood up, staggered toward the service door, then collapsed near the heater switch. The gas continued to build overnight. By morning, the concentration exceeded 1,800 to 2,000 parts per million. Levels fatal in under 2 minutes of exposure. At 7:42 a.m., the same attendant from the previous day discovered her lying on the tile floor. He immediately called emergency services. He reported finding a woman unresponsive near the spa pool, unsure if she was breathing. Within 5 minutes, paramedics and firefighters arrived, evacuating the building and beginning CPR. A portable gas detector went off as soon as they entered, so they put on full breathing gear and started airing out the building. Fire crews later measured dangerously high carbon monoxide levels throughout the facility before shutting down the system. The official cause: acute carbon monoxide poisoning. In the following weeks, the Braithwaite family filed a wrongful death suit alleging negligence. Investigators, however, found security footage confirming unauthorized entry. Records showed Monica had filed similar comfort complaints at 3 previous resorts. The hotel paid for a full ventilation overhaul costing more than $100,000. For a time, guests would still ask about the rumor of a woman found by the pool, but the questions dissipated over time. It was May 20th, 2017, a bright Saturday morning in San Marino, California, the kind of day that drew tourists and socialites alike to the manicured calm of the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens. The museum staff had prepared for a full weekend of guided tours. No one expected that by noon, the Serenity would be replaced by sirens and a body bag. Patricia Lowell, 48, was the kind of person who turned every shared space into a stage. A well-dressed Pasadena socialite and habitual committee volunteer, she prided herself on bringing energy to events others called refined. She had married into money early, filling her empty hours with charity galas, interior design workshops, and a small lifestyle account that rarely reached beyond her social circle. On the morning of the 20th, she joined a friend for a docent-led tour at the Huntington's European Sculpture Gallery, a serene space lined with marbles and plaster casts on wooden plinths. The docent, a retired art historian, opened with a standard warning. The statues were old, delicate, and in some cases, reconstructed over fragile supports. Patricia rolled her eyes audibly. She whispered to her friend that if something was that breakable, it shouldn't be on display. When the group reached Diana the Huntress, a 19th century plaster reproduction of an 18th century French marble, Patricia saw her chance for attention. The docent gently reminded everyone not to cross the velvet barrier. Patricia ignored her, stepping over it with practiced entitlement. Security footage later showed her brushing off a warning hand from her friend. She leaned back against the figure, laughing, arm extended for a selfie. The plinth beneath the statue gave a quiet creak. A few visitors gasped. Patricia turned her head and, smirking, tapped the statue's hip as if to prove her point. The structure failed in seconds. The plinth tilted forward, and the top-heavy sculpture lurched. The reproduction, weighing roughly 300 to 400 pounds, slid off its base, its outstretched arm striking her shoulder before the torso slammed into her chest. The marble floor amplified the impact, a hollow, irreversible sound. Patricia went down instantly, pinned beneath the shattered remains. Dust clouded the air, and tourists screamed. One man tried to lift the figure, but the broken mass was too heavy. Staff initiated an emergency closure procedure while calling 911. Paramedics and firefighters from the San Marino Fire Department arrived within 7 minutes. But the injury was unsurvivable. The autopsy cited massive blunt force trauma and internal hemorrhage. Museum staff closed the gallery for weeks, and the damaged sculpture was moved into storage, its fragments too ruined to restore. The Huntington issued a brief statement acknowledging the tragedy and reinforcing its safety protocols. Her family's reaction was muted and divided. Her husband, a local businessman, refused media contact, leaving flowers at the museum gate in private. Her adult children reportedly argued about whether to mention the circumstances publicly. The eventual obituary cited a sudden accident without details. It was August 6, 2014, at Lake Lanier, Georgia. Late summer traffic crowded the public boat ramp, where wet, algae-slick concrete and idling engines turned small delays into conflict. Colleen Price was 44, a self-employed event decorator who worked weddings, reunions, and community festivals around northern Georgia. Her work required early access to shared venues, and she developed a habit of asserting priority loudly. Locals knew her for public disputes over parking and setup space. Online, she posted complaints accusing fishermen and boaters of blocking ramps and wasting time, which she believed she had claimed. She followed small business forums that encouraged standing ground in public spaces and framed confrontation as professionalism. Boat ramps are designed for brief loading and unloading, not parking or arguments. The slope, waterline, and constant vehicle movement leave little margin for error. Wet concrete reduces traction and unattended vehicles can roll easily if brakes are not fully engaged. Late that afternoon, Colleen arrived to find two fishermen finishing loading their boat. Frustrated by waiting, she drove her sedan halfway down the sloped ramp toward the water to confront them directly. She exited quickly, leaving the engine off, the transmission in neutral, and the parking brake only partially engaged. As she shouted and gestured, several bystanders noticed the car begin to creep backward. The concrete was wet near the waterline, and the car's rear tires lost friction. A man yelled for her to set the brake, but her attention stayed on the argument. The vehicle rolled faster, angling toward the lake. Colleen turned suddenly as the car gained speed, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then ran after it. She ran after the moving sedan, slipping once on algae-slick concrete. Reaching the driver's door, she pulled it open and climbed halfway inside, one foot still on the ramp. Her hands fumbled for the brake pedal as the car continued downhill, momentum building beyond control. The sedan reached the water nose first. As it splashed in, Colleen lunged farther into the driver's seat, trying to reach the brake. The door swung inward behind her as the car continued rolling. Water surged through gaps and vents, soaking her legs and chest within seconds. The engine stalled. The car continued sinking, bubbles racing past the windows. Emergency crews arrived in 6 minutes. Divers entered the water and reached the submerged car, but rising water pressure prevented the doors from being opened. The vehicle was secured and pulled free, but Colleen was unresponsive and was pronounced dead at the scene as the ramp was closed. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as drowning. Water entered her lungs, blocking oxygen exchange and leading to rapid loss of consciousness. No mechanical defects were found in the vehicle, and the parking brake was functional. The death was ruled accidental. Witness statements and video footage showed the incident began with Colleen driving onto the ramp to confront other users, leaving her car unsecured on a wet slope and attempting to re-enter it as it rolled toward the lake. County officials later installed wheel stops, repainted warning lines, and added signage clarifying that the ramp was not to be used for parking or confrontation. Investigators noted the safety measures addressed misuse of the ramp, not a failure of equipment or design. It was June 23, 2018, on the Colorado River through Grand Canyon, Arizona. Scorching desert heat baked the canyon walls as rafters prepared for a journey through some of America's most challenging whitewater. High spring runoff had turned normally manageable rapids into churning death traps that demanded respect and proper safety protocols. Cordelia Ashworth, 41, was a Scottsdale property management supervisor who maintained detailed complaint files on over 200 service providers and had left 1,247 negative online reviews over 5 years. Ashworth had booked the 3-day rafting trip using a Groupon discount voucher and spent 4 weeks sending emails to Grand Canyon River outfitters, questioning procedures, demanding free upgrades, and threatening negative reviews. She brought laminated printouts of alternative rafting techniques she had researched online and a folder containing pre-written complaint forms for various scenarios. Outfitter records show Ashworth had contacted them 37 times via phone and email, requesting to speak with supervisors about guide qualifications and safety procedures. Lead guide Jake Morrison noted Ashworth had interrupted the mandatory safety briefing 6 times to question established procedures. Ashworth boarded the 18-foot raft at Lee's Ferry at 8:30 a.m. with 7 other passengers and 2 experienced guides. According to witness statements, she immediately began questioning Morrison's instructions and made statements about superior methods she had researched through online forums. She loosened her Type 5 life jacket straps within minutes, claiming the fit was uncomfortable and requirements were excessive for her swimming ability. Multiple passengers observed Ashworth taking detailed notes about perceived safety violations and customer service failures throughout the morning. She photographed equipment, documented guide statements, and maintained a running commentary about inadequate procedures. A retired Michigan couple reported Ashworth demanding the raft stop multiple times so she could photograph evidence of claimed safety violations. According to witness statements collected by National Park Service investigators, Ashworth became increasingly agitated, approaching the first major rapid section. She stood up in the raft repeatedly while making statements about demanding full refunds and questioning Morrison's competence and certification. when Morrison instructed all passengers to remain seated and secure life jackets for approaching Granite Rapids. Ashworth ignored instructions and continued standing while making complaints about unprofessional attitude. The incident occurred at 11:52 a.m. as the raft entered Granite Rapids' tongue. Ashworth was standing and gesturing while making statements about customer service standards when the raft hit the first major wave train. She fell overboard into 52 degrees Fahrenheit water approximately 60 yards upstream from the most dangerous rapid section. Ashworth's loosened life jacket immediately shifted position upon water entry, riding up around her neck and providing minimal torso flotation. Morrison immediately threw rescue ropes and began maneuvering toward Ashworth's position, but rapid hydraulic features made approach dangerous. Emergency protocols were activated immediately, with Morrison radioing other rafts and requesting helicopter assistance. Ashworth was swept into Hermit Rapids before rescue completion. Witnesses reported seeing her strike multiple rocks before disappearing beneath the surface, near a large hydraulic feature. Ashworth's body was located at 3:23 p.m., approximately 1.2 miles downstream, caught in a debris field. Her waterproof phone case contained detailed notes about the rafting service and a partially written online review criticizing water temperature, rapid intensity, and staff professionalism. The medical examiner documented drowning as primary cause of death, with contributing factors including blunt force trauma, hypothermia, and inadequate life jacket positioning. It was October 11th, 2021, at an enclosed renovation site inside a mixed-use building in downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Temporary lights cast uneven shadows across scaffolding while workers prepared materials for the afternoon shift. Multiple barricades surrounded the active floor, and entering the zone meant bypassing the physical safeguards meant to prevent falls. Kaylin Davis, 40, was working from home in a nearby unit while the building underwent scheduled interior upgrades. Friends and co-workers described her as strict about rules when they applied to others, but insistent that building staff adjust normal procedures around her remote work schedule. Neighbors said she frequently complained about ordinary maintenance sounds and often approached staff directly when she felt her concerns were not being addressed quickly enough. Family members later noted she sometimes entered restricted areas to confront workers she believed were ignoring her expectations. That afternoon, she walked to the renovation level, intending to record what she claimed was unacceptable noise. Even though the work followed posted construction hours and had not produced anything unusual for an active renovation site, the upper floor renovation area contained alternating sections of plywood sheets, temporary coverings, and open framing. Maintenance logs noted one large floor cutout awaiting reinforcement later in the day. Barriers, caution tape, and orange mesh fencing were positioned around the perimeter, and signs directed residents away from the restricted area. Workers first saw Kaylin approaching while holding her phone up. Footage showed her moving directly toward the barricades, angling the camera toward the equipment. Witnesses reported that she lifted the caution tape and walked underneath without slowing, muttering that workers were ignoring her and that she needed to document it. A site supervisor called out for her to stop. She glanced briefly toward him, but continued forward with her phone raised. Two workers stepped into her path, but she sidestepped around them and advanced deeper into the corridor, disregarding repeated warnings. Inside the zone, workers followed behind her, urging her to turn back. She continued walking while recording, focusing entirely on her phone. As workers approached from the front, she stepped backward to widen her camera angle. Surveillance footage captured her taking 3 backward steps along a plywood sheet without looking at the floor behind her. The uncovered cutout lay roughly 4 feet back from her position, a gap about 3 feet wide that opened to the level below. Her 4th backward step carried her right foot past the edge of the plywood. With no surface beneath her heel, her weight shifted abruptly, causing her body to pitch backward as her phone fell from her hand. Witnesses saw her upper body tilt sharply before she dropped through the opening, rotating slightly during the fall. She fell approximately 12 feet and struck an exposed horizontal beam with her back and shoulders before collapsing onto the subflooring below. Workers reached the lower level moments after hearing the impact. Responders arrived shortly afterward, but found no signs of movement. The coroner determined she died from injuries consistent with a fall onto structural components. Following the incident, building management increased physical barriers at corridor intersections and updated contractor protocols to reinforce strict access control around renovation areas. It was March 18, 2016, at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. The early spring air was cold enough that steam from the thermal features drifted low across the boardwalks, drawing early-season tourists who wanted unobstructed views of the hot springs. At Midway Geyser Basin, the paths around Grand Prismatic Spring were already filling with visitors stopping to photograph the morning colors. Christina Fleming, 37, had driven from Spokane the day before in a minivan covered with anti-government decals. She posted regularly in conspiracy forums and maintained a small following of about 1,000 people. In the weeks leading up to the trip, she had been filming videos claiming Yellowstone's thermal features were government-controlled heating systems meant to discourage public access to restricted land. Her social media posts suggested she intended to expose what she believed were fabricated claims about park safety. Park entrance records show she arrived at 7:16 a.m. CUM. Gate attendants reported she complained about entrance fees and insisted national parks were public property. Ranger logs note she dismissed thermal danger signage as part of a misinformation effort. She was given the standard safety sheet, which she brushed off on camera as unnecessary fear messaging. Throughout the morning, witnesses saw Fleming stop families along the boardwalk to lecture them about what she called manipulated temperature readings. She carried a compact tripod, a handheld camera, and a small LED light, frequently blocking the narrow walkway while adjusting her equipment. A family from Minnesota later said she became irritated when people walked through her filming angles, referring to them as overly conditioned and unwilling to question official statements. Around 10:10 a.m., Fleming reached the boardwalk section overlooking Grand Prismatic Spring, where roughly 40 visitors were present. Witness statements describe her starting a live stream and telling viewers she intended to demonstrate that the thermal ground was safer than officials claimed. She began touching warm runoff, trickling across the legal edges of the walkway, water that cools rapidly and can feel harmless. Witnesses said she grew more confident each time she tested it, telling nearby hikers that park messaging overstated the danger. Several visitors reported hearing her say she planned to prove her claims by stepping off the boardwalk. Rangers were not in the immediate area at that moment. According to multiple accounts, she climbed over the railing despite warnings from other tourists. The ground beyond the boardwalk at Midway Geyser Basin consists of fragile silica crust that is thin, unstable, and unable to support body weight. Fleming walked several steps toward a smaller runoff channel, still filming. Within seconds, the crust collapsed beneath her. Witnesses described a loud crack, followed by a splash as she plunged into a concealed thermal pool estimated to be near 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Several people attempted to shout instructions, but the water caused catastrophic burns almost instantly. She struggled briefly before losing the ability to pull herself out. Visitors called 911 using personal cell phones. Signal is inconsistent in the basin, but one caller eventually connected. Yellowstone's emergency team responded, but rescuers must use heat-resistant gear and maintain distance for their own safety. By the time they reached her, Fleming showed no signs of life. Her remains were recovered later that afternoon once conditions stabilized. The medical examiner identified extensive thermal burns as the cause of death, noting that water above 180 degrees Fahrenheit causes full-thickness burns in less than 1 second, making survival impossible. The incident was officially classified as a fatal thermal area accident. It was June 2nd, 2017, in Fresno, California. In a suburban street, a city maintenance crew prepared for a routine trim of a hazardous branch near a power line. However, one resident perceived this as an intrusion, creating a fatal chain of events. Tanya Wilcox, 45, lived alone and worked as a home-based medical billing clerk. Over the years, she had filed numerous complaints against delivery drivers, landscapers, and even passing cyclists, framing their presence as threats to her peace. Her relationship with risk was paradoxical. She feared minor inconveniences, yet acted rashly when asserting control. City maintenance operations required crews to manage trees that threatened overhead lines. Bucket trucks used insulated platforms and controls protected by weatherproof casings, but operators remained vulnerable to indirect electrical exposure when water or conductive debris reached sensitive components. Modern insulated controls are designed to prevent conduction from incidental water exposure, but high-pressure streams directly into seams can create dangerous paths. Tanya had challenged these crews before, once accusing them of siphoning power from her home when they parked near her driveway. Workers were aware of prior confrontations and attempted a wider buffer that day, hoping to avoid engagement. The branch above Tanya's property line had been marked weeks earlier after a supervisor noted its weight shift and proximity to the utility feeder. As soon as the crew positioned the bucket, Tanya came out shouting, claiming the workers were removing shade that belonged to her yard. Body-worn cameras showed her pacing, phone in hand, shouting into it as she filed another 911 call. Officers, already familiar with her residence, arrived within minutes and instructed her to remain behind the tape. Instead of stepping back, she retrieved a high-pressure garden hose from the side of her house. Witnesses later said she appeared fixated on the bucket operator, muttering about corruption and unfair targeting of her property. Officers repeated warnings, reminding her to keep distance from the equipment. Tanya ignored them and advanced until she stood just outside the cordoned zone, the hose nozzle clutched tightly in one hand. As the operator raised the saw, Tanya lifted the hose and fired a concentrated stream upward. Body cam footage captured the water striking the truck's lower control panel, flooding a partially unsealed junction box. As the fault current energized the panel, the high-pressure stream created a conductive path back toward Tanya, sending current through the nozzle, into her hands and across her chest. A sharp crack sounded as water seeped into those vulnerable seams, producing a brief flashover through metal components. Tanya's arms jerked rigid, her body locking instantly under the electrical load. The hose fell slack only when her grip failed, and she collapsed backward onto the pavement, her head striking hard enough to leave a visible smear of blood. The truck's breaker tripped within seconds, preventing further conduction. Officers approached immediately, but found no pulse. Her limbs were still partially contracted, an indication of electrothermal trauma causing muscle tetany. Paramedics called by the officers arrived within minutes, but were unable to restore cardiac activity. The maintenance crew secured the area, while police collected footage and statements from the workers and neighbors. The coroner's report documented ventricular fibrillation caused by electrical shock, full-thickness burns across both palms consistent with high-voltage contact, and a skull fracture from the fall. Body cam recordings confirmed the sequence without discrepancies. The city issued a brief statement explaining that the workers followed protocol and warning residents not to interfere with electrical maintenance operations. The damaged console was replaced later that week, and the hazardous branch was removed without further incident. It was December 8, 2017, on Mount Washington, New Hampshire. Brutal winter conditions with howling winds had forced all commercial operations to shut down. The mountain's notorious weather claimed lives regularly, but some people believed they could outsmart nature with bargain basement gear and stubborn determination. Prudence Grimsby, 52, was a Worcester, Massachusetts accountant who maintained meticulous financial records, documenting her frugal lifestyle. Despite having the means to purchase proper winter gear, Grimsby insisted on using only second-hand items from garage sales and thrift stores. She maintained detailed spreadsheets tracking every purchase and frequently posted social media content criticizing outdoor equipment pricing as corporate manipulation. Mount Washington Rescue Coordination records show Grimsby had contacted them 17 times over the previous month, requesting free trail information and questioning recommended gear lists. Her brother Michael, an experienced mountaineer, had repeatedly offered to loan proper equipment, but Grimsby declined all offers. Grimsby's social media posts from the week prior documented her preparation process, including videos of her $3 garage sale jacket, sneakers she attempted to waterproof with duct tape and plastic bags, and a sleeping bag rated for 40 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. She posted content mocking gear reviews and outdoor equipment companies, stating that real outdoors women didn't need expensive equipment to survive. Grimsby began her ascent at 7:45 a.m. from Pinkham Notch Visitor Center, where staff attempted to dissuade her due to extreme weather conditions. Visitor Center logs note she argued with staff for a long time about their authority to prevent her hike, claiming she had researched conditions and determined warnings were exaggerated to sell expensive gear. Trail camera footage from a 2,000-foot elevation, time-stamped 9:17 a.m., shows Grimsby ascending in inadequate clothing while carrying a small day pack. The camera captured her filming content about proving gear industry claims wrong, holding up her garage sale receipt as evidence. According to witness statements from two experienced hikers who encountered Grimsby at 10:30 a.m. near the 3,500-foot elevation, she was already showing hypothermia signs, including slurred speech and poor coordination. The pair attempted to convince her to turn back, offering space in their emergency shelter and assistance with her descent. Grimsby refused their help and made statements about being tougher than people who relied on proper equipment. The last confirmed sighting came at 11:43 a.m. from weather personnel working along the upper slopes around the 4,200-foot level. Her improvised gear was visibly failing, with duct tape peeling from her shoes and her jacket providing inadequate wind protection. Search and rescue operations began at 6:30 p.m. when Grimsby failed to return by her stated 4 p.m. deadline. Rescue teams using specialized winter equipment began ascending at 7:15 p.m. following Grimsby's known route. Grimsby was located at 8:47 a.m. the following morning, approximately 200 yards from a known emergency shelter site. She was found seated against a boulder, still wearing the same improvised clothing and duct-taped shoes, and had been deceased for several hours based on body condition. The medical examiner determined that severe hypothermia was the primary cause of death, with no indication that she attempted to seek additional shelter before collapsing. It was October 3rd, 2017, in Asheville, North Carolina. A renovated historic home sat on a narrow residential street, staged for short-term rental, quiet inside despite mounting frustration among its guests. Melissa Crane was 34 and worked in online retail returns for a national e-commerce platform. Her job revolved around disputes, chargebacks, and customer complaints, rewarding persistence and suspicion. Friends described her as meticulous to the point of fixation, someone who assumed dishonesty unless proven otherwise. She believed most listings were intentionally misleading and treated proving that belief as a personal victory. Outside of work, Melissa followed consumer protection forums and creators who exposed false advertising. She frequently filmed complaints and threatened reviews to force concessions. On the girls' weekend, she volunteered to handle the rental review. The house dated to the 1940s and had been cosmetically updated, but much of its exterior hardware remained original beneath fresh paint. That morning, Melissa fixated on the advertised mountain view. From the living room, only rooftops and trees were visible. The listing mentioned partial views from upper windows, but early fog and foliage blocked sightlines. Weather advisories noted reduced visibility until midday. Her friends suggested waiting or stepping outside. Melissa dismissed them, saying the claim was already false. She began recording on her phone, narrating her frustration. Instead of walking downstairs and outside, she opened a second-story window facing the street. Beneath it sat a window-mounted air conditioning unit, bolted into aging wood and visibly rusted. Warning labels advised against standing or leaning on the unit, but she ignored them. To prove the view was non-existent, Melissa climbed onto the windowsill and stepped directly onto the metal AC housing. Friends told her to stop, their voices audible on the recording. The unit groaned under her weight. Rather than step back, she leaned farther out, extending her phone to frame the shot, fully trusting a 40-year-old appliance to hold her. The unit tore free from the window frame. Screws ripped out of dry wood, and the heavy metal housing dropped outward. Melissa lost balance and fell with it, striking the AC unit as they both slammed into the concrete patio below. The impact crushed her midsection against the metal casing. She landed on her side, pinned partially beneath the unit. There was a brief gasp, then silence. Blood spread rapidly beneath her torso as internal injuries took effect. The phone skidded across the patio. Still recording. No one heard a scream. One guest ran outside while another called 911. Neighbors stepped onto porches. Melissa did not move. Her breathing did not resume. The AC unit lay twisted beside her, its power cord stretched taut across the patio, Emergency services arrived in 7 minutes. Paramedics assessed her and immediately identified catastrophic trauma. There was no pulse. Severe abdominal and chest injuries were visible. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and the area was secured. The medical examiner later reported massive blunt force trauma to the torso. Multiple ribs were fractured, internal organs were ruptured, and severe internal bleeding occurred within seconds of impact. Oxygen loss and circulatory collapse followed rapidly, leaving no chance of recovery. The death was ruled accidental after review of footage, witness statements, and structural failure. Toxicology showed no alcohol or drugs. Investigators noted the air conditioning unit and window frame were never designed to support body weight and failed exactly as expected under load. The host removed all listing photos referencing views and suspended the property indefinitely. The rental platform required structural inspection before relisting. The girls' weekend ended that morning, with guests leaving separately. No review was ever posted, and the footage was never publicly released. It was February 4th, 2022, at a multi-level indoor climbing facility in Hartford, Connecticut. Bright overhead lighting reflected across the padded floors while staff prepared ropes and equipment for the afternoon crowd. The facility featured both standard bouldering walls and a specialized lead climbing tower that required harness systems and staff supervision for access above 15 feet. Liana Wilson, 28, was visiting the facility during a weekend trip with friends. She worked in digital marketing, and co-workers later described her as dismissive of safety rules when they applied to her, but quick to report others for minor violations. Friends said she often insisted experienced people didn't need basic precautions and regularly left equipment setup tasks to staff during fitness activities. The gym's lead climbing tower featured a secured access gate at its base, with an electronic lock system requiring staff clearance for entry. The tower rose 25 feet and was designed exclusively for supervised climbs with mandatory harness attachment. Multiple warning signs detailed the height restrictions and equipment requirements. Witnesses reported that Liana approached the tower during a shift change when the supervising instructor was briefly called away to handle an equipment issue. The electronic gate had been left unlatched after a manual override was used during the equipment issue, and staff had not yet re-engaged the lock when the shift change occurred. Security footage showed her entering the restricted area during this brief window, when no staff member was stationed at the tower base. Staff discovered her unauthorized access when the supervising instructor returned to find the gate open, and Liana already halfway up the tower wall. From ground level, they called for her to stop climbing and return to the base for proper equipment fitting. Witnesses reported hearing the staff members' repeated instructions, but noted that Liana continued ascending without acknowledging the directions. Near the 20-foot mark, Liana positioned herself on 2 intermediate holds while adjusting her stance to reach a higher grip. The hold she selected had been marked in maintenance logs for surface wear and was scheduled for replacement during the next route-setting cycle. As she committed her full body weight to the transition, her left foot began sliding on the lower hold. Security footage captured the initial slip as her shoe lost contact with the textured surface. Her right hand, still reaching for the higher grip, could not compensate for the sudden weight shift. Witnesses described seeing her body rotate counterclockwise as she lost contact with the wall, falling backward toward the gym's standard 4 to 6 inch commercial crash pads 20 feet below. Staff reached her immediately and called for emergency services while clearing the surrounding area. The coroner determined that she died from severe impact trauma, including a basal skull fracture and cervical spine injury consistent with an uncontrolled backward fall from height. Forensic review confirmed that the absence of a harness eliminated any chance of controlled descent. Following the incident, facility management expanded restricted area barriers and implemented automated gate locks requiring staff clearance before access to elevated walls. It was April 9th, 2022, at a coastal grassland reserve in southern Australia. Late morning light fell across the open plains as pockets of wind moved through the tall reeds. The reserve contained free-roaming feral horses, creating conditions where unauthorized approach placed visitors within the animal's unpredictable range. Emily Millier, 34, was visiting the reserve during a weekend trip with extended family. She worked in event planning, and relatives later described her as dismissive of safety guidelines she considered overly cautious or meant for inexperienced visitors. Family members noted she often became defensive when staff or guides questioned her judgment in outdoor settings and regularly ignored distance restrictions at wildlife areas to capture close-range photographs. The horses in this reserve were part of a long-established population known for defensive behavior around people. Rangers had placed informational signs along the marked paths, advising visitors to maintain at least 50 feet of distance and prohibiting food offerings. Seasonal reports indicated that several young stallions had been competing for grazing space that month, increasing their reactivity to unfamiliar movement near the herds. A ranger stationed near the trailhead had specifically warned Emily's group about approaching the horses after observing her walking ahead with food visible in her hand. Visitors on the main track saw Emily leave the designated trail and walk directly toward a grazing cluster at the edge of the plain, ignoring the ranger's earlier warning. Investigators later reviewed footage from a nearby tourist's camera, showing her holding out a handful of snacks taken from her bag. The same footage captured a ranger calling out to her from the trail, instructing her to stop and return to the marked path. Emily glanced back briefly, but continued forward, waving dismissively in the ranger's direction before turning her attention back to the horses. The footage captured the stallion raising its head as she approached, its ears angled sharply in the direction of her movement. The terrain near the ravine consisted of uneven ground and scattered rock outcrops formed by erosion. Environmental review noted that the grass surface concealed shallow dips, making footing unstable. Witnesses recalled seeing Emily adjust her phone angle repeatedly as she stepped closer, shifting her attention between the animal and the camera. As she closed the distance, the stallion advanced a few steps. Rangers reviewing the footage identified the posture as one commonly displayed when a stallion feels challenged or startled. The horse lifted its front legs in a short rear, redirecting its weight backward before striking forward with a kick. The movement occurred quickly enough that nearby visitors had little time to react. Investigators concluded that Emily attempted to step back during the rear, but misjudged the terrain behind her. Her foot landed on a concealed depression, and she lost balance at the same moment the stallion's kick extended. The force of the impact displaced her sideways into a rock outcrop near the ravine's edge. Several witnesses ran toward her as the horse retreated to rejoin its herd. Responders stationed near the visitor center reached the site soon after. She showed no signs of movement when they arrived. The coroner determined that she died from head and upper body injuries, consistent with being struck and then falling against a fixed surface. Forensic analysis supported that her backward step placed her in direct alignment with the rock formation at the time of impact. Reserve officials later reinforced perimeter boundaries around active grazing zones. Updated guidance emphasized that feral horses, despite appearing calm at distance, respond defensively to direct approach and food gestures. Additional signage was installed along the trail to limit off-path movement and discourage interaction attempts. It was June 14, 2018, in Orlando, Florida. A week of heavy rain had already softened the ground, and several blocks had been dealing with reports of shifting soil. The saturated terrain was nearing a breaking point. Paula Venter, 38, worked as a freelance event promoter for small businesses in the area. Her social media presence was central to her work, and she relied on frequent live updates to draw clients. She liked being seen as the first to document an incident, even when no one asked her to. Because her career depended on steady engagement, she developed a habit of inserting herself into risky scenes to maintain relevance. Her interest in capturing high-intensity footage often brought her to construction sites, storms, and minor emergencies. She rarely wore protective gear, trusting instead that her awareness and quick reactions would keep her safe. The city had recently issued advisories about soil instability due to continuous rainfall, warning residents to stay clear of depressions or cracking pavement. Paula saw these alerts as exaggerations. Sinkholes were common enough in the region that she viewed them as opportunities rather than hazards. The incident began when residents heard a sharp cracking noise near the intersection of Redbud Lane. The pavement had started to separate, and water seeped through new gaps in the asphalt. Several neighbors gathered at a distance while emergency services were called. City workers arrived first, placing traffic cones and stringing temporary caution tape to keep people back. Witnesses later stated that Paula appeared within minutes, holding her phone at arm's length and live streaming to her followers. She voiced irritation that the situation was being overstated. She ducked under the tape and approached the unstable rim. The footage from her live stream, corroborated by videos taken by neighbors, showed her stepping onto a section of pavement already overhanging a void and partially undermined by water erosion. She stood inches from the edge, angling her camera to capture the dark cavity forming below. The asphalt beneath her gave a hollow clatter as it shifted, but she continued positioning herself for what she described as a dramatic angle. The surface began to fracture along a crescent shape behind her, and small shards of pavement slid inward before she reacted. The slab she was standing on broke free and dropped abruptly. Her body pitched forward, and she gave a short, sharp scream as she fell. A neighbor recording from a safe distance captured the moment she struck a lower layer of loosened, saturated soil and subgrade debris. She rolled onto her side and slid deeper as the walls of the sinkhole sloughed inward. Within seconds, she was pulled into the narrowing cavity. Rescue crews arrived quickly, but faced unstable conditions that prevented immediate entry. When the collapse stabilized, responders found her several feet below the surface, wedged beneath wet, compacted soil mixed with asphalt fragments. She had sustained multiple skull fractures, broken cervical vertebrae, and had soil deep in her airway, consistent with suffocation during burial. The medical examiner stated that death resulted from a combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxia, linked to rapid soil compression. Her phone was recovered and entered into evidence with the final recorded frames. The neighborhood later pushed for stricter, permanent barriers around sinkholes, citing the incident as a preventable tragedy amplified by unnecessary risk. It was November 3rd, 2017, at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, Gate B-42. The storm outside was relentless. Inside, hundreds of grounded passengers sat in tense silence, faces lit by phones and flight boards that never changed. The atmosphere was heavy but resigned, except for one woman whose rising voice cut through the hum of exhaustion. Linda Ferguson, 50, was a senior operations manager for a mid-tier logistics firm based in Naperville. Her professional life was defined by control. She thrived on being the loudest presence in any room. Subordinates described her as demanding to the point of cruelty, and she carried that same energy everywhere. Restaurants, stores, and especially airports. She prided herself on her efficiency, but mistook impatience for competence. Her management style rewarded confrontation, and years of getting her way had eroded any filter between impulse and action. Travel had always been a stage for her worst behavior. O'Hare, with its chaos and delays, was the perfect storm for her temperament. She insisted on flying business class for domestic trips, considering it a sign of professional success. Her company covered the costs reluctantly, preferring to avoid the inevitable tantrums that came with denying her requests. On this particular trip, she was returning from a quarterly review meeting in Boston, already seething over the client's unrealistic expectations. When weather delays hit Chicago, grounding every outbound flight, she saw it not as an act of nature, but as a personal insult. By early evening, Gate B-42 had become a pressure cooker. The storm showed no sign of easing, and the gate agent, a young employee named Ben Alvarez, was fielding a line of frustrated passengers alone. When Linda reached the front, she demanded immediate rebooking, a hotel voucher, and an upgrade. Ben explained that due to the widespread cancellations, all accommodations were being processed by the system queue. Witnesses said her voice escalated with every word. She accused the airline of targeting her, then leaned over the counter, her face inches from Ben's, as the waiting area fell silent. Security footage later reconstructed what followed. When Ben attempted to type on his terminal, Linda snapped that he was making it harder than it needed to be. She came around the counter despite multiple warnings. In her frustration, she decided to prove how simple the task was. She grabbed the edge of a freestanding check-in kiosk, one of the older, portable units weighing nearly 300 pounds. It contained a built-in scale, computer, and bolted monitor. mounted on a metal bracket. The unit wasn't designed to be moved manually, but maintenance staff had recently unlocked its casters for cleaning earlier that evening. As she shoved it, the top-heavy frame shifted forward instantly. Security footage later confirmed she had bypassed the counter-rope barrier and initiated contact with the machine before it toppled. The kiosk teetered for half a second before tipping completely. Several witnesses gasped as the monitor edge caught her across the temple, spinning her sideways. The full mass of the kiosk followed, crashing down with her beneath it. The monitor bracket and base struck her chest and skull simultaneously, producing a sharp, hollow crack that echoed through the terminal. Passengers froze in shock before screams erupted. Ben lunged forward, but the damage was immediate and catastrophic. Massive cranial trauma. No pulse. Paramedics responding to a call from the personnel arrived within minutes, finding her pinned under the twisted machine, lifeless. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head and thorax. The force of the impact was equivalent to being struck by a small motorcycle. The airline issued a brief internal notice, citing a fatal accident involving passenger interference with gate equipment. Legal representatives reached a confidential settlement with the Ferguson family to prevent litigation. In the days after, Ben Alvarez was kept out of the terminal while investigators reviewed footage. Co-workers said he barely spoke, staying behind closed doors in the operations room until his shift ended. He filed an incident report, then requested transfer to a non-customer-facing role. He never returned to Gate B42. It was August 11, 2022, on Interstate 75 near Dayton, Ohio. Midday traffic moved fast under a hazy sky, heat shimmering above the asphalt as construction narrowed lanes ahead. The shoulder thinned and widened unpredictably, littered with tire fragments and road debris. Vehicles passed within feet of one another, leaving no margin for error. Linda Harris was 47, a regional sales representative whose job kept her on the road across Ohio and neighboring states. Performance reviews cited persistence and drive, but also documented repeated complaints about aggressive behavior behind the wheel. She believed confrontation protected her position and often recorded disputes on her phone, treating documentation as leverage rather than warning. She followed productivity influencers who framed dominance as efficiency and control as professionalism. To her, highways were not shared systems, but competitive spaces. Modern interstates, however, allow little tolerance for error. At highway speeds, vehicles cover nearly 100 feet per second, and shoulders exist for emergencies, not confrontations. That afternoon, congestion increased as construction funneled traffic into fewer lanes. A warning sign advised caution for merging ahead. When another driver honked after she cut too closely, Linda reacted immediately. Instead of continuing forward, she braked hard and steered her SUV onto the shoulder, gravel spraying beneath the tires. She exited without checking mirrors, phone already raised. Walking backward toward the travel lane, she shouted while recording. Cars rushed past at 65 miles per hour, wind pulling at her clothes and distorting sound. One driver slowed and called 911 to report a pedestrian standing on the interstate shoulder. Linda stepped partially into the lane, gesturing toward traffic. Her attention stayed fixed on the driver she believed had wronged her. She did not see the semi-truck approaching in the right lane. As the truck passed, its extended side mirror struck Linda's shoulder. The impact knocked her off balance rather than throwing her. She staggered forward, lost her footing on the uneven pavement, and fell into the lane alongside the trailer. There was no time to recover. The rear wheels rolled over her torso as the truck continued forward before the driver could react. Vehicles braked violently. The semi stopped several hundred feet ahead. Drivers exited their cars in shock, some still recording. Linda lay motionless on the roadway. Emergency services were already en route. State troopers arrived within minutes, followed by paramedics. They found catastrophic injuries incompatible with life. No resuscitation was attempted, and the interstate was closed for investigation. The medical examiner later documented massive blunt force trauma. Internal organs were crushed, major blood vessels torn, and skeletal structures destroyed. Circulation and brain function ceased immediately. The death was ruled accidental. Dashcam footage from multiple vehicles confirmed the sequence of events. The trucking company cooperated fully, and the driver was not charged. Investigators emphasized that pedestrians on active highway shoulders face lethal forces within seconds, regardless of intent or visibility. The footage was later used in roadside safety training without identifying names. Linda's employer confirmed prior warnings related to confrontational conduct. Traffic resumed after several hours. The shoulder where she stopped showed no lasting mark, only skid patterns that faded as vehicles continued through the construction zone. It was July 22, 2015, in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Summer tourists crowded the resort marina as rental engines idled, fuel hung in the air, and offshore boat traffic sent unstable wakes rebounding through the dock lanes. Tara Whitman was 41, a dental office manager from Ohio on a company vacation with co-workers. At work, she was known for confidence that routinely crossed into defiance, often reframing refusal to listen as independence. She prided herself on being physically fit and repeatedly described herself as naturally athletic, believing that coordination and strength made formal instruction unnecessary. She followed lifestyle fitness influencers who promoted instinct over training and treated caution as weakness. Marina staff noted her impatience during paperwork and her visible irritation with safety reminders. Jet skis respond instantly to throttle input, reaching dangerous speed within seconds. Near docks, reflected wakes compress reaction time, and fixed structures leave no room to correct mistakes once acceleration begins. That afternoon's orientation was explicitly flagged as higher risk than usual. Boat traffic was heavy, and posted warnings advised reduced speed near launch zones due to wake interference. Instructors were required to maintain physical control during launch and provide step-by-step throttle guidance. Tara interrupted repeatedly, dismissing the instructions as excessive and unnecessary. When the instructor stepped onto the rear platform to demonstrate controlled acceleration, Tara raised her voice and told him to get off. Tourists nearby turned their phones toward the dock. Staff hesitated, balancing policy enforcement against the risk of escalation. The instructor stepped away, leaving Tara seated alone with the engine idling, still inside the confined dock corridor. Without clearance or countdown, Tara slammed the throttle instead of easing forward. The jet ski surged instantly from idle to high power. There was no open water to absorb the acceleration. She applied full throttle while still inside the confined dock corridor, where fixed structures left no margin for correction. Within seconds, the craft struck a reflected wake from a passing tour boat. The bow rose abruptly, momentarily lightening the hull and disrupting steering control. Tara's grip failed as the jet ski surged forward without directional correction. Momentum carried her directly toward the dock, chest exposed, body rigid. She slammed into a wooden piling at high speed. The impact crushed her chest inward against the fixed structure, collapsing ribs and compressing internal organs. The sound was blunt and final. She folded forward and dropped into the water without resistance as the jet ski drifted away. A lifeguard called 911 immediately, while another staff member pulled her toward the dock ladder. She showed no purposeful movement. Her skin faded rapidly as internal bleeding progressed unchecked. Emergency crews arrived in 6 minutes. CPR was attempted on the dock, but her chest wall was visibly unstable from multiple fractures, making effective compressions impossible. Despite oxygen, medication, and continued resuscitation during transport, she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The medical examiner determined death resulted from catastrophic blunt force trauma. Multiple rib fractures, lung collapse, and major vascular damage caused rapid internal bleeding and oxygen deprivation. Brain injury followed within moments, eliminating any chance of survival. The death was ruled accidental. Toxicology showed no alcohol or drugs. Marina surveillance and bystander footage confirmed full throttle acceleration inside the dock zone. The resort suspended jet ski rentals that evening and later banned solo launches without instructor control. In the weeks that followed, staff were retrained to enforce authority without exception during guest resistance. Additional signage clarified idle zone limits near docks. It was September 3, 2016, in Manchester, England. There was a low-level tension around one house on Larchmere Road. For weeks, Residents had sensed that something was building toward a confrontation. Claire Harwin, 41, worked as a data entry clerk for a local logistics company. Her colleagues said she often voiced suspicions about technology in the office. Outside work, she spent hours researching what she believed to be disruptive electromagnetic fields. Her posts in the community Facebook group ranged from long explanations of her symptoms to accusatory comments about devices other residents used. She bought EMF meters online, covered her bedroom walls with reflective insulation, and spoke frequently about wanting control over her environment. When a neighbor installed a new router, Claire documented the timing of her headaches. When another replaced old wiring, she took photos of the technician's van. By mid-2016, she had convinced herself that she was being harmed by the technology around her. The coax cables running down the sides of homes were no longer mundane infrastructure. To her, they were conduits of danger. The incident began when a new resident moved in next door and scheduled an internet installation. Claire saw the contractor's ladder from her window and assumed he was mounting a device that would direct signals into her home. Weather conditions worsened that afternoon with intermittent drizzle, leaving a thin film of moisture on the roof tiles and eaves. Despite this, Claire dragged a patio chair beneath her second-story window, climbed onto it, and pulled herself onto the roofline. The cameras across the street captured her movements clearly. She crawled along the narrow ledge, her attention locked onto a coax line running down her own exterior wall. She took a pair of kitchen shears from her jacket pocket and positioned herself to reach it. The footage shows her leaning outward, shifting more weight onto her right foot, which pressed against a section of eave coated in algae. Her shoe slid. The movement was subtle at first, a small loss of balance, but it changed her posture enough that she instinctively grabbed the gutter. The rusted brackets could not hold her weight, giving way immediately. With the support gone, her body swung outward off the ledge. She dropped approximately 22 feet, rotating slightly in the air before striking the iron fence below. Her arms and legs flailed naturally from the momentum shift. The decorative fleur-de-lis points concentrated the force of impact. One finial penetrated the left side of her chest, lacerating the lung and severing major blood vessels. Another entered her upper abdomen, tearing through the liver. Neighbors ran outside after hearing the crash and saw her on the ground, struggling to breathe. Emergency services that were called by her neighbors arrived within minutes, but she died before they could stabilize her. The coroner's report documented massive internal hemorrhage, perforation of the hepatic vein, and complete collapse of the left lung. Toxicology showed no substances that could have impaired judgment. The conclusion stated that her injuries were immediately unsurvivable. The police investigation confirmed that the cable she attempted to cut was her own inactive service line, not connected to the neighbor's equipment. Her property was eventually sold by her sister, and the new owners replaced the fence and exterior fittings, removing the visible remnants of the incident. It was July 4th, 2015, on Coronado Beach in San Diego, California. Families crowded the shoreline for fireworks and barbecues. To most, it was a holiday afternoon, sun, noise, and celebration. But for Darla Hennepin, it was another day to assert control. Darla, 45, had lived in Coronado her entire life, divorced, childless, and financially comfortable from her late parents' estate. She filled her days with neighborhood watch meetings and complaint calls to the city. Locals described her as high-strung and combative, particularly when she deemed her peace was disturbed. She had fought every noise permit, every parking expansion, every drone license she could file against. Her habits were predictable. Each morning she staked out the same square of sand, bordered by windbreakers and coolers that formed a defensive perimeter. She owned a folding cart labeled "Private Property" in marker. The aluminum pole she used to mount her beach shade, a 10-foot telescoping rod, technically meant for flags or boat masts, was polished from constant handling. Darla liked tools that looked official, things that signaled authority. That illusion of control would fail her the instant she turned that pole from decoration into weaponry. That afternoon, the winds intensified. A freelance photographer, hired by a local tourism board, piloted a small drone over the beach to capture crowd footage. The craft hovered nearly 60 feet up, its faint buzz lost under laughter and surf. But Darla fixated on it. To her, it represented intrusion, proof that her space had been violated again. Witnesses later said she began muttering under her breath before storming toward the man's setup near the access road. He explained his credentials and FAA permit, but Darla dismissed him, calling him a creep and voyeur. After failing to get him to stop, she returned to her car, face flushed and determined. When she came back, she carried the aluminum pole. People nearby assumed she was adjusting her shade. Instead, she walked straight toward the descending drone. The photographer yelled for her to leave it alone, but she was already mid-sprint. Sand kicked up around her bare feet as she swung the pole overhead, missing the drone entirely. The effort unbalanced her stance. As she tried again, the tip of the pole arced upward, striking an overhead 12,000-volt distribution line running above the access road. The explosion was instantaneous. A burst of white-blue light engulfed her. The sound, a sharp crack followed by a low electrical hum, froze the crowd. Witnesses said her body stiffened mid-step, arms locked around the pole. For a moment, she seemed suspended before collapsing to the sand. Several beachgoers hesitated, unsure if it was safe to touch her, before one man called emergency services and another cautiously began CPR. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Darla's hand showed deep burns where it had touched the pole, and parts of her clothing were singed. She wasn't breathing, and despite resuscitation attempts, she showed no response. She was declared dead on sight. Investigators found clear scorch marks leading from the contact point down through her sandals, the current exiting through damp sand. Electrical engineers later confirmed she'd struck a 12,000-volt distribution line, an almost certain instant death. In the days that followed, the city framed the event as a tragic accident during a crowded holiday. Safety reminders about power lines were added to beach access signs. Darla's family held a private cremation in La Jolla. Few attended. Neighbors left small flowers near the site, not from sympathy, but acknowledgement. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.